In the heart of a glittering city, where skyscrapers pierced the heavens and secrets whispered through the streets, a mysterious event was brewing. Golden envelopes, their origins unknown, began appearing across town, slipped beneath doors, nestled in mailboxes, or pressed into the hands of passers-by by a cloaked figure who vanished before questions could be asked. Each envelope held an invitation, penned in flowing, elegant script. You are cordially invited to a midnight masquerade at the Grand Regal Hotel. 10 Mom, sharp, formal attire. Masks required. Come as you are, but know that masks will hide more than faces this night. The invitations reached a curious mix of recipients, titans of industry, dazzling socialites, struggling artists, shopkeepers, and those scraping by on hope alone. No logic seemed to govern the selection, yet each person felt the weight of possibility in their hands. The city hummed with anticipation, as if the night promised to unravel something extraordinary. High above the city, in a penthouse glowing with luxury, Margaret Whitmore turned the golden invitation over in her manicured hands. Her lips curled into a satisfied smile. The Grand Regal Hotel was synonymous with prestige, and an event there could only mean one thing: a gathering of society's elite. She envisioned herself gliding through the crowd, her designer gown shimmering, her status on full display. This was her stage, her moment to shine. She reached for her phone to summon her stylist, already planning her grand entrance. Across town, in a cramped apartment where the air carried the faint tang of paint and turpentine, Henry Thompson stared at the same invitation with a mix of wonder and disbelief. An artist whose canvases rarely sold. He lived on the edge of survival, his dreams far outpacing his means. The invitation felt like a lifeline, a rare chance to step into a world that might finally see his talent. He had no idea who had sent it or why, but the thought of rubbing shoulders with those who could change his life was too tempting to ignore. Setting the invitation down, he began mentally piecing together an outfit from his meager wardrobe. Meanwhile, in a sleek office adorned with modern art and cutting-edge technology, Evelyn Carter sat at her desk, her sharp eyes scanning a list of confirmed attendees. A subtle smile played on her lips. Everything was unfolding precisely as she'd planned. The invitations had been carefully crafted: no logos, no names, just the promise of an unforgettable night. She'd curated the guest list with intention, blending the city's wealthiest with those who rarely glimpsed their world. The night had to feel spontaneous, untainted by suspicion. Her assistant, a brisk young woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped into the room. "Everything's set, Miss Carter," she said. "The hotel arrangements are complete, security's in place, and the staff is briefed. All guests are accounted for." "Excellent," Evelyn replied, her voice steady and calm. "Ensure no one knows who's behind this until the moment is right. I want them to experience the night without assumptions." The assistant nodded and left, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. She gazed out her window at the city below, a tapestry of light and shadow. Once, she had been nothing in this vast, unforgiving place, a nobody clawing her way up from nothing. Through grit and ingenuity, she'd built an empire, and now she held the power to orchestrate something profound. This midnight masquerade wasn't just a party. It was a stage to reveal who people truly were when cloaked in anonymity and when their masks were finally removed. She picked up a golden invitation from her desk, her fingers lingering on its edges before setting it down. The night would unveil many truths, and she was ready. As the hour approached, the city buzzed with excitement. Guests prepared with a mix of eagerness and unease. For some, like Margaret, the night was a chance to dazzle. For others, like Henry, it was a fleeting opportunity to belong. But for all, the masquerade promised a night of enigma, where masks would conceal faces but not the essence of those who wore them. The Grand Regal Hotel stood like a jewel against the night sky, its towering windows aglow with warm, golden light. Outside, a procession of sleek cars rolled up to the entrance, each depositing elegantly dressed guests onto a plush red carpet. The air was crisp, charged with the promise of something extraordinary. One by one, the guests stepped out, their masks glinting under the streetlights, their hearts thrumming with anticipation. In Senheim, the hotel was a vision of splendor. The marble-floored lobby, with its soaring columns, was merely a prelude to the grandeur of the ballroom on the second floor. High ceilings adorned with intricate frescoes, crystal chandeliers sparkling like constellations, and walls draped in lush velvet created an atmosphere of timeless elegance. A string quartet played softly from a cornered stage, their music weaving through the murmur of voices and the clink of champagne flutes. Servers in crisp black and white uniforms glided through the crowd, offering drinks on silver trays. The air was alive with the scent of fine perfumes and the rustle of silk and velvet, each guest a piece of a living mosaic. Margaret Whitmore was among the first to arrive, her head held high, her ornate gold mask perfectly complementing her shimmering gown. She swept into the ballroom like a queen surveying her court, her sharp eyes scanning for familiar faces, those who mattered in her world. To her, this was no mere party, but a performance, a chance to cement her place among the elite. Spotting a cluster of acquaintances, their masks as extravagant as her own, she glided over, her voice dripping with practiced charm. "What a spectacle," she purred, her smile calculated. "I can't wait to see who else dares to show." "Quite the eclectic guest list, I hear," one of her companions replied, her silver filigree mask catching the light. "It should be interesting." Margaret's eyebrow arched. "We'll see about that." As their conversation hummed with subtle barbs and polished pleasantries, another guest entered the fray. Jonathan King, clad in a tailored tuxedo and a sleek black mask that accentuated his chiseled features, moved through the crowd with the confidence of a man accustomed to command. His eyes darted from face to face, assessing who might serve his ambitions. Spotting Margaret, he approached with a smooth, "Quite the event, isn't it?" "Jonathan, darling," she replied, her smile widening. "It's intriguing, though I'm curious if it'll live up to the hype." "Time will tell," he said, raising a champagne flute in a subtle toast before turning his attention to the room, already calculating his next move. While the elite mingled, Henry Thompson slipped into the ballroom, his borrowed suit and simple black mask marking him as an outsider. His eyes widened at the opulence around him, a world so far removed from his own. He felt like an imposter, yet the invitation in his pocket reminded him he belonged here tonight. Moving cautiously through the crowd, he avoided the gazes of the more flamboyant guests, his artist's eye drinking in the scene, the play of light on the chandeliers, the vibrant hues of gowns and masks blending like a living painting. He didn't know who had invited him, but for now he was content to simply be, to let the night unfold. Pausing near the stage where the quartet played, Henry let the music wash over him, a moment of solace amid the extravagance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside him. He turned to find a woman in a deep blue mask with silver accents, her elegant yet understated presence setting her apart. "It is," Henry replied softly. "The music, it's like it's telling a story." She nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Every work of art has a story, music, paintings, even a night like this. There's always something deeper beneath the surface." Henry studied her, sensing a quiet strength, but before he could say more, she offered a faint smile and melted back into the crowd. He watched her go, intrigued but content to let the moment pass. Some encounters, he knew, were meant to be fleeting. Meanwhile, Margaret and Jonathan continued their rounds, exchanging witty remarks and sizing up their peers. They barely noticed Henry, nor would they have cared to. To them, the night was about power and prestige, not discovery. As the ballroom filled, the atmosphere grew electric, the anticipation almost tangible. The guests, masked and mysterious, moved through the space like players in a grand drama, each waiting for the moment the night would shift. And through it all, Evelyn Carter watched from the shadows, her blue and silver mask shielding her identity. She moved unnoticed, a silent observer of the scene she'd orchestrated. She saw Margaret's calculated charm, Jonathan's predatory ambition, and Henry's quiet wonder. She noted the dismissive glances, the subtle slights, the way some guests treated those they deemed beneath them. The night was young, and the true story was yet to unfold. For now, she let the masquerade play on, but soon the masks would fall, and the truth would light up the room like a spark in the dark. As twilight draped the city in a velvet hush, Evelyn stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her silhouette a quiet sentinel amidst the swirl of opulence she had meticulously orchestrated. Every facet of the evening, the cascading melodies, the intricate tapestries adorning the walls, the carefully curated roster of attendees was her creation. Yet tonight, she was not the maestro in the spotlight, but a shadow among the revelers, her presence cloaked in the guise of just another guest. She glided through the throng, her senses finely tuned to the symphony of voices weaving tales of ambition and intrigue. In one corner, a man in a tailored black tuxedo leaned toward his companion, a vision in a crimson gown that caught the chandelier's glow. "They say the host is some reclusive tycoon," he murmured, his tone laced with curiosity. "Throws these lavish affairs just to toy with the guests, to see who cracks under the grandeur." The woman's eyes swept the room, her lips curving slightly. "Whoever they are, they've got impeccable taste," she replied, her voice tinged with suspicion. "But nothing this extravagant comes without a price. There's always a catch." Evelyn's lips twitched beneath her mask, a delicate silver filigree that shielded her amusement. She had anticipated such whispers, the speculation that fueled the night's allure. Let them ponder, she mused. The truth would unfurl in its own time. She drifted onward, her steps light, her gaze flickering toward Margaret Whitmore, who held court near a marble fountain, her audience a cluster of society's elite. Margaret's laughter sliced through the air, sharp and crystalline, as she spun a tale of her latest sojourn to the French Riviera. Her listeners hung on every word, their faces alight with envy and admiration. "One must be discerning about these so-called exclusive gatherings," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "There's exclusive, and then there's, well, you know." She cast a glance around, ensuring her words landed on the right ears. "I do hope tonight lives up to its billing. It would be dreadfully dull if it fizzled out." Evelyn noted the haughty edge in Margaret's tone, the way she wielded her status like a scepter. To Margaret, this gala was another stage to flaunt her dominance, to remind everyone of her place atop the social hierarchy. Evelyn had seen her kind before countless times. In fact, but tonight, she was after something more profound. The masks the guests wore weren't merely ornate accessories, they were mirrors of the personas they donned, the carefully crafted facades they presented to the world. Tonight, Evelyn intended to peer beyond them. Not far off, Jonathan King stood encircled by business associates, his voice a low, steady cadence as he dissected market forecasts and investment prospects. He exuded the polished confidence of a titan of industry, but Evelyn caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the constant vigilance in his eyes. Jonathan thrived in this arena, where alliances were forged and fortunes pivoted on a handshake. Yet his relentless pursuit of the next deal left little room for anything else. Evelyn lingered, observing him a moment longer. Men like Jonathan, she knew, often betrayed the most when they thought themselves untouchable. As she wove through the crowd, Evelyn's attention snagged on Henry Thompson, a solitary figure near the ballroom's edge, half hidden by the shadow of a towering column. His eyes, wide with wonder, drank in the scene the glittering chandeliers, the interplay of light across the polished floor. Unlike Margaret's posturing or Jonathan's calculated charm, Henry seemed out of place, his presence unassuming, almost reverent. Evelyn felt a spark of curiosity. She approached him with measured steps, her voice soft, conspiratorial. Quite a spectacle, isn't it? Henry turned, startled, his gaze sharpening as he recognized her from a fleeting earlier encounter. "It is," he said, his voice warm with awe. "I've never seen anything like it." Evelyn's smile deepened behind her mask. That's the magic of nights like this. Every detail is crafted to pull you into another world, to make you feel like you've stepped into a dream. Henry nodded, his eyes drifting back to the room. "It's like standing inside a painting," he murmured. a living, breathing masterpiece. His words struck a chord in Evelyn, their sincerity a rare gem amidst the evening's polished banter. While others saw the gala as a platform for self-aggrandizement, Henry saw artistry, a creation to be cherished for its beauty alone. "Are you an artist?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. He hesitated, then nodded. "I am. Not a successful one. Mind you, at Miggs, at least not yet." Evelyn tilted her head, studying him. "Success depends on how you measure it," she said. "What kind of art do you make?" "Paintings. Mostly," Henry replied, his voice softening with passion. "I try to capture fleeting moments, emotions, the things people overlook." Evelyn felt a kinship with his words, a mirror to her own intentions for the night. "It sounds like you see the world through a different lens," she said. Henry shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe I just try to see what's really there." Their exchange was cut short by a burst of laughter from Margaret's circle, the sound jarring against the music's gentle strains. Evelyn glanced over, then back at Henry. "Do you know many people here?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not really. I was shocked to even get an invitation." Evelyn's smile was warm, enigmatic. Sometimes the most unexpected invitations lead to the richest experiences. Henry looked at her, a question forming in his eyes, but before he could voice it, Evelyn excused herself. "Enjoy the evening, Mr. Thompson," she said, offering a slight nod before melting back into the crowd. As she moved on, Evelyn's mind churned with thoughts of Henry's quiet authenticity, a stark contrast to the self-serving chatter around her. He saw beauty where others saw status, and that singularity made him a figure to watch. She continued her silent vigil, slipping through conversations, her ears catching fragments of ambition, envy, and veiled boasts. The mask might have hidden faces, but the guests' true selves were beginning to seep through, just as she'd planned. The night deepened, and the ballroom's atmosphere crackled with a new energy. The music, once a refined underscore, quickened into a vibrant pulse, urging the guests to shed their restraint. Champagne flowed freely, loosening tongues and inhibitions. Laughter grew louder, conversations more candid, laced with both genuine curiosity and the ever-present undercurrent of rivalry. Amid this fervor, a subtle shift took hold. The masks, meant to conceal, seemed to embolden the guests, granting them license to reveal or perhaps exaggerate who they truly were. The ballroom, once a theater of decorum, was morphing into something rawer, more revealing. From her perch near the grand staircase, Evelyn watched it all unfold, her sharp eyes catching every nuance Margaret's laughter, now tinged with a desperate edge, Jonathan's confidence hardening into something colder, more predatory, Henry's quiet awe giving way to a faint unease. The moment was ripe. With a discreet gesture to the maitre d', Evelyn set her plan in motion. The music softened to a hush, the lights dimmed, and the guests' attention turned toward the room's center. The chatter faded, replaced by a murmur of anticipation as the crowd instinctively formed a loose circle. Evelyn stepped forward, her presence commanding yet understated. She waited until every eye was on her, then raised a hand for silence. The room fell still, the air thick with expectation. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the hush. "I hope you've all been savoring the night's delights." A few murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd, but most remained silent, their curiosity piqued by the shift in tone, while only Evelyn let the moment linger, building the tension before continuing. "Tonight is a celebration of masks, not just the ones adorning your faces, but the ones we wear every day. Masks of wealth, of power, of prestige. We craft these facades to navigate the world, to project what we believe others want to see." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, lingering briefly on Margaret, Jonathan, Henry. But what happens when those masks are stripped away? When we can no longer hide behind the identities we've so carefully constructed? A ripple of unease stirred the crowd, mingled with intrigue. Evelyn's words had struck a nerve. "Tonight," she continued, "I invite you to shed your masks, both the physical ones and the ones you carry within. I want to see who you are when the trappings of status fall away." The guests hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. A few reached for their masks, fingers hovering, but none dared to act. Evelyn's smile was gentle, encouraging. "I know it's daunting. We've grown so accustomed to our facades that bearing ourselves feels like a risk. But I promise you, there's freedom in it. And for those brave enough to take that step, there's a reward, a glimpse of something far more precious than anything you brought here tonight." The word reward hung in the air, tantalizing. Slowly, hesitantly, a few guests began to comply, their masks falling away to reveal faces marked by discomfort, relief, and uncertainty. Evelyn watched closely, noting each reaction. Margaret was among the last to unmask, her movements graceful but her expression tight, a flicker of doubt betraying her composure. In the grand ballroom, where chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the assembled guests, the air was thick with anticipation and unease. Each person wore a mask, an ornate disguise that concealed their true selves, a tradition of the evening that promised mystery and intrigue. Yet, as the night unfolded, the masks began to come off, revealing not just faces but the raw, unguarded emotions beneath. Jonathan King stood near the edge of the crowd, his fingers lingering on the edge of his velvet mask. He removed it with a slow, deliberate motion, as if each movement was a calculated step in a game only he understood. His face, now exposed, remained a study in control, sharp cheekbones, a tightly set jaw, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something harder, a glint that suggested he was far from untouched by the vulnerability of the moment. He scanned the room, assessing the others, weighing what this unmasking might mean for him. Across the room, Henry Thompson took a different approach. With a quiet sigh, he slipped off his simple mask, letting it dangle from his fingers. For Henry, a man who had never been comfortable with pretense, the act felt almost redundant, like shedding a coat he'd never wanted to wear. Yet, standing there among the glittering crowd, he felt a strange cocktail of emotions, relief, yes, but also a nagging uncertainty. What would happen now that the barriers were down? He trusted the night would reveal its purpose. But the unknown loomed large, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into uncharted territory. When most of the guests had bared their faces, a hush fell over the room. Evelyn, the enigmatic host of the evening, stepped forward. Her presence commanded attention, though she carried herself with an unassuming grace. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but resonant, cutting through the murmurs. She reached up and, with a slow, deliberate motion, removed her own mask. The room gasped as her face came into view, and recognition rippled through the crowd like a wave. Evelyn Carter, the woman who had orchestrated this extraordinary night, was no ordinary host. She was a legend in the city, a philanthropist whose rise from humble beginnings to towering influence was the stuff of myth. Her face, now revealed, was striking yet approachable, her eyes bright with purpose. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the faint clink of glasses and the rustle of silk. The guests stared, trying to reconcile the poised woman before them with the larger-than-life figure they had only heard about in whispers. Evelyn let the moment linger, then spoke again, her voice steady and warm. "You're probably wondering why I've gathered you here tonight," she began. "The truth is, I wanted to create a space where we could meet as equals, stripped of the masks we wear every day, the ones that define us by wealth, status, or reputation. A place where we could connect, truly connect, beyond the surface." Her words hung in the air, and she paused, letting them settle. "I know this isn't easy," she continued. "It's hard to let go of the identities we've crafted, the walls we've built. But I believe that if we can see each other as we are, flawed, human, real, we can discover what truly matters. And, as I promised, there's a reward for those who embrace this chance. I won't say more now, but trust me, it will be worth it." With that, Evelyn stepped back, and the room erupted into a low buzz of conversation. Whispers of excitement, confusion, and curiosity swirled among the guests. She had set the stage, and now the true unmasking would begin not just in this moment, but in the hours ahead. As these strangers navigated a night without their usual defenses, the ballroom pulsed with a new energy, raw and electric, as the guests, now exposed, grappled with their vulnerability. Margaret Whitmore was the first to break the tense silence that followed Evelyn's speech. She flashed a bright, practiced smile, her voice carrying across the room with forced confidence. "Well, this is certainly a twist, isn't it?" she said, loud enough to draw eyes. "I must admit, I didn't expect to find myself in such an unconventional gathering." A few guests chuckled nervously, clinging to her attempt to restore normalcy, but the unease in the air was palpable. Margaret's smile, though dazzling, couldn't hide the tension in her posture, the slight tremor in her voice. She was a woman accustomed to control, and this night had thrown her off balance. Jonathan King, ever the strategist, took a different tack. He approached Evelyn, his expression guarded but curious. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice measured, "you've given us quite a lot to think about, but I'm curious, what exactly do you hope to accomplish with this experiment?" Evelyn met his gaze, unflinching. "What I hope, Mr. King, is that we can see each other without the filters society imposes, to connect on a level that's deeper than titles or wealth, to learn something about ourselves and each other." Jonathan raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "And you think one night can do all that?" Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile. "It's a start." He nodded, a grudging respect in his eyes, and stepped back, already calculating how to turn this night to his advantage. As the guests began to mingle, hesitant conversations sparked to life. The room hummed with nervous energy, as people revealed glimpses of themselves they'd long kept hidden. Henry Thompson stood alone near the edge of the crowd, still processing the night's unexpected turn. He admired Evelyn's vision. There was something liberating about the idea of seeing people without their polished exteriors, but he couldn't shake the sense that he didn't belong. These were people of wealth and power, worlds apart from his modest life. What place did he have here? Evelyn, as if sensing his unease, approached him with a warm smile. "Are you holding up okay, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, her voice gentle. Henry blinked, startled by her presence. "Oh, yes, I'm fine, just taking it all in." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "It's a lot to process. I know, but I'm glad you're here. You bring something unique to this night." Henry frowned. "Unsure, but I don't know about that. I'm not like the others. I don't have their money or influence." Evelyn's smile softened. "That's exactly why you're important. Henry, you see the world differently, and that perspective is invaluable. Don't doubt your place here." Her words struck a chord, and Henry felt a flicker of something gratitude, perhaps, or hope. "Thank you," he said quietly. Evelyn's gaze held his, steady and kind. "You're welcome tonight. Tonight isn't about who has the most power or wealth. It's about something deeper. Take your time, you'll find your way." She gave his arm a reassuring squeeze before moving on, leaving Henry with a newfound sense of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there was a place for him in this strange, unmasked world. Meanwhile, Margaret Whitmore was working to reclaim her dominance. She stood at the center of a small group, her voice bright and commanding as she addressed them. "It's fascinating, isn't it?" she said, her tone polished but strained. "We all wear masks in our daily lives, don't we? But it's important to remember who we are beneath them." The guests nodded, eager to align with her confidence, but her smile was tight, her poise fraying at the edges. Margaret was not used to being unsettled, and the night's events had shaken her more than she'd admit. Jonathan King watched her from across the room, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. He thrived in moments of uncertainty, his mind already spinning with the ways to navigate this new dynamic. While others floundered, he remained composed, ready to seize whatever opportunities this unmasking might offer. Evelyn's ideals might be lofty, but Jonathan was a pragmatist, and he intended to make the night work for him. As the hours passed, the guests grew more accustomed to their unmasked selves. Some embraced the openness with a sense of freedom. their laughter and stories filling the air with newfound warmth. Others clung to the remnants of their old personas, their voices sharp with defensiveness. The ballroom crackled with tension and possibility, a microcosm of human connection and conflict. Evelyn watched it all with quiet satisfaction, her eyes darting from one interaction to another. She had expected resistance, but the divide among her guests was stark, those who embraced the night's challenge and those who fought to hold on to their carefully crafted facades. The unmasking had revealed not just faces but truths, exposing the fault lines between those open to change and those who feared it. Margaret, despite her efforts, found herself increasingly isolated. Her once commanding presence had softened, her confidence eroded by the raw honesty of the night. The guests who had once flocked to her now drifted toward others, drawn to the authenticity that Margaret struggled to muster. Her voice, once a beacon, had grown brittle, her attempts to steer the conversation faltering. Yet Evelyn remained hopeful. The night was far from over, and she knew the most profound moments were still to come. As the guests continued to navigate this uncharted territory, she saw the seeds of something real, connections rooted not in wealth or status but in shared humanity. The masks were off, and the truth was beginning to emerge, fragile but undeniable. The ballroom, alive with the hum of voices and the clink of glasses, was no longer just a stage for a grand event. It was a crucible, where the raw, unfiltered essence of each guest was being forged into something new. The grand ballroom buzzed with a restless energy, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the faint clink of crystal glasses. Margaret Whitmore stood at the center of a small cluster of guests, her laughter ringing out just a touch too shrill, as if she were trying to command the room's attention with sheer force of will. "Isn't it just absurd," she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs of conversation. "This whole notion that we should cast aside who we are, pretend we're something else entirely. It's like a game for dreamers. Charming in theory, I suppose, but far too fanciful for the real world." Her words hung in the air, and the guests around her shifted uncomfortably, their polite smiles tightening. They nodded, but their eyes darted elsewhere, and one by one, they slipped away, leaving Margaret alone with her empty champagne flute. Her confident grin wavered, and she quickly drained the last of her drink, the bubbles sharp against her throat. Turning to survey the room, she searched for another group to charm, but a strange unease settled over her. For the first time in years, Margaret felt the ground beneath her shift, as if the spotlight she'd always commanded had dimmed. The room, once her stage, seemed to hum with a new rhythm one she couldn't quite grasp. Across the ballroom, Jonathan King leaned against a marble pillar, watching Margaret's faltering performance with a flicker of amusement and a trace of scorn. He'd always found her overbearing, her need to dominate every conversation exhausting. Now, as her influence waned, he felt a quiet satisfaction in her struggle. But Jonathan was no showman. He preferred the shadows, biding his time. Unlike Margaret, he'd adapted swiftly to the night's strange turn of events. He understood that true power wasn't just about money or titles, it was about perception, about shaping how others saw you. And tonight, the real power in the room belonged to Evelyn Carter. As if summoned by his thoughts, Evelyn glided toward him, her expression calm but unreadable, like a still lake hiding depths below. "Mr. King," she greeted with a slight nod, her voice smooth as velvet. "How are you finding the evening?" Jonathan met her gaze, his own expression carefully guarded. "It's been revealing," he said, choosing his words with precision. "You've certainly stirred things up, Miss Carter." A faint smile curved Evelyn's lips. "That was the intention. But I'm curious, what do you think of it all? Will this shedding of facades lead to anything worthwhile?" Jonathan paused, weighing her question. "It depends on who's in the room," he replied. "Some of us are quick to adapt, to seize the moment. Others cling to what they know. But in the end, it's not about the masks we wear, it's about the choices we make when they're gone." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glinting with something like approval. "Well said. I believe tonight will show us who we really are." Jonathan allowed himself a small smile. "Perhaps, but tell me, Miss Carter, what's your stake in this? What do you hope to uncover?" Her gaze held steady, but a shadow of something happened, something Jonathan couldn't quite decipher flickered in her eyes. I'm not here to gain anything, Mr. King. I'm more interested in what we all might learn. He tilted his head, acknowledging her words but remaining skeptical. In his experience, no one acted without an agenda, no matter how noble their words. As Evelyn moved on to greet other guests, Jonathan's mind churned, calculating the possibilities. Whatever her true motives, the night was far from over, and he intended to turn it to his advantage. Meanwhile, Henry Thompson found himself drawn into a quieter corner of the ballroom, where a small group of guests had gathered near a towering window overlooking the glittering city below. Unlike the room's more prominent figures, these people were unassuming, their voices soft but earnest. A woman named Clara turned to Henry with a warm smile. "Quite a night, isn't it?" she said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I don't think any of us saw this coming." Henry nodded, grateful for her warmth. "It's been a surprise, that's for sure, but there's something refreshing about it. It's rare to see people so unguarded." Clara's smile widened. "Exactly, I've had more real conversations tonight than I have in years. It's like those masks were holding us back from truly connecting." A man named Peter joined in, his voice thoughtful. "It's strange, but without all the pretense. I feel like I can just be myself. No need to play a role." Henry felt a spark of connection, a rare sense of belonging. It's liberating, isn't it? We spend so much time building walls. We forget what it's like to be honest with each other. As the group continued to talk, Henry found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. For the first time in ages, he felt like he was part of something genuine, built not on wealth or status, but on shared vulnerability and understanding. The connections forming around him were real, and they filled a void he hadn't realized was there. But not everyone shared Henry's newfound ease. Margaret, now standing by the bar with a fresh glass of champagne, was barely containing her fury. She'd been brushed off by group after group, her usual charm failing to hold sway. How had it come to this? She'd arrived expecting to reign over the evening, as she always did. But instead, she was sidelined, ignored by people who once vied for her attention. Her forced smile did little to mask the storm brewing within her. Jonathan King approached, his expression inscrutable. "Margaret," he said with a nod, his tone laced with just a hint of mockery. "Enjoying yourself?" Margaret's smile was brittle, as much as one can, I suppose, though I find this whole unmasking nonsense rather tiresome. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Tiresome or perhaps unsettling. Her eyes narrowed, but she kept her voice light. "What's unsettling about it? We're all just people, masks or no masks. Nothing changes who we are." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Perhaps, but some seem to struggle with the shift more than others." Her grip tightened on her glass, her composure fraying. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Jonathan shrugged, his tone deceptively casual. "Just an observation. Some of us are at ease in our own skin. Others, well, they lean a bit too heavily on the masks they wear." Margaret's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of anger, but she held herself in check. "I don't know what you're getting at, Jonathan, but I have nothing to hide." His smirk was subtle but cutting. "Of course not." "Margaret, of course not." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her seething in his wake. She knew he was trying to rattle her, to make her question herself, but she refused to let him win. She'd fought too hard, built too much, to let it all slip away now. Yet as she glanced around the room, watching guests connect in ways that felt foreign to her open, unguarded, free of the hierarchies she'd always navigated, she couldn't shake the sense that something fundamental had changed. For the first time, Margaret Whitmore wasn't sure where she belonged. Evelyn, observing from a distance, noted Margaret's growing agitation. She hadn't meant for anyone to feel cast adrift tonight, but she knew transformation was rarely gentle, especially for those with the most to lose. Still, she believed this upheaval was necessary, a dismantling of old structures to make way for something truer. As the night wore on, the divide among the guests grew starker. Some, like Henry and Clara, forged bonds untainted by the need to impress or compete. Others, like Margaret and Jonathan, clung to their familiar ways, even as their influence waned. The ballroom's elegance had given way to something rawer, more unpredictable. The masks were gone, and with them, the fragile social order that had once held the group together. Henry, who'd spent much of the evening on the sidelines, felt himself drawn into the heart of the shift. Clara, sensing his hesitation, invited him to join her and a few others in a quieter corner. "Come on, Henry," she said with a grin. "We're just talking. No need to feel out of place." He followed, and this group, a mix of familiar faces and new ones, welcomed him warmly. Their conversation was strikingly open, a stark contrast to the usual posturing of such events. "I never realized how much we hide behind our wealth," one man said, his voice tinged with wonder. "It's like a shield, keeping us from facing who we really are." A woman named Layla nodded. "I've always felt pressure to project success, but tonight feels different. It's like we're finally being honest." Henry listened, captivated. He'd long believed there was more to life than chasing status, but hearing others echo his thoughts was a revelation. When Clara turned to him, her eyes bright with curiosity, he found his voice. "I think we get so caught up trying to impress each other that we lose sight of what matters. Tonight, without the masks, it feels like we're getting to the core of things. It's freeing." The group murmured in agreement, and Henry felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. These people, despite their wealth, were like him, searching for something real in a world that often felt hollow. But not everyone was finding such clarity. Margaret, now huddled with her dwindling circle of allies, was barely containing her rage. "This is absurd," she muttered, her voice low but venomous. "Evelyn thinks she can just upend everything. Well, I won't let her." Her friend Sylvia, ever the peacemaker, tried to calm her. "Margaret, maybe we should just go along with it." Evelyn's made her point. No need to stir things up. In the grand ballroom, where chandeliers cast a golden glow over the assembled elite, Margaret Whitmore's eyes blazed with barely contained fury. "This is absurd." "Sylvia," she hissed, her voice trembling with outrage. "Do you even hear yourself? We're being played for fools, and you expect us and to just sit here and swallow it." Her words cut through the hum of conversation, sharp and unyielding, drawing uneasy glances from those nearby. Sylvia, caught off guard by the intensity of Margaret's outburst, shrank back slightly, her lips parting as if to respond. But before she could find her words, Jonathan King glided toward them, his presence as composed as ever. His face betrayed no emotion, his cool detachment a stark contrast to Margaret's fiery indignation. "Margaret," he said smoothly, his tone measured, "there's no need to let this get the better of you. Raising your voice won't change what's happening." Margaret whirled on him, her anger now a living thing, unleashed and untamed. "Calm down. You're telling me to calm down when Evelyn Carter is making a mockery of us in front of everyone. What's wrong with you, Jonathan? Are you blind to what's going on here?" Her voice cracked with the weight of her humiliation, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Jonathan didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, his voice as calm as a still lake. "I see everything, Margaret. I see a room full of people grappling with a situation they didn't see coming. But letting your temper run wild, that's not going to fix anything. It'll only make you look like the fool you're so afraid of being." Margaret's mouth opened, ready to fire back, but something in Jonathan's tone, a sharp, icy edge, made her pause. For the first time that evening, a sliver of doubt crept into her mind, cold and unsettling. Was she losing her grip on the situation? The thought sent a shiver through her, and she felt the ground beneath her shift, just slightly. Jonathan sensed her hesitation and leaned in, his voice low and deliberate. "This is a game, Margaret, Evelyn's game, and right now she's holding all the cards. If you let your emotions take over, you'll hand her the victory on a silver platter. And you despise losing, don't you?" Margaret's throat tightened. She did hate losing more than anything. Her anger ebbed, replaced by a steely determination that hardened her features. "I won't lose," she said, her voice barely audible but laced with resolve. Jonathan's lips curved into a smile, though it held no warmth. "Good. Then let's figure out how to turn this around." Across the room, Evelyn Carter observed the exchange with quiet satisfaction. From her vantage point, she could see the shift in Margaret's demeanor, the way her shoulders squared, the way she began to rally her allies with renewed purpose. It was exactly what Evelyn had anticipated. Margaret wasn't one to surrender easily, and Evelyn relished the challenge. She had orchestrated this evening with precision, knowing resistance would come, but she wasn't worried. The real test lay in how the other guests would respond, and already she could see the tide turning. Many were beginning to embrace the unexpected shift in the evening's tone, their conversations growing deeper, more authentic. In another corner of the ballroom, Claire and Henry Thompson's group had swelled, drawing in more guests who were tired of the usual superficial chatter. Their discussion had taken a bold turn, touching on the weight of maintaining their polished facades, the quiet loneliness that gnawed at them despite their wealth, and the fleeting moments of connection they craved. The air around them buzzed with a rare camaraderie, a stark departure from the shallow pleasantries that typically dominated such gatherings. Henry, usually reserved, found himself speaking with a freedom he hadn't felt in years. He shared his fears, his doubts, and to his surprise, no one judged him. The more he spoke, the more he realized he wasn't alone. These people, draped in privilege, were as human as he was, their struggles mirrored in his own. As the night wore on, a divide emerged among the guests. On one side stood Margaret and Jonathan, clinging fiercely to the old voice, determined to preserve their control and status. On the other were those like Henry and Clara, who were beginning to glimpse the freedom that came with vulnerability, with shedding the masks they'd worn for so long. And at the heart of it all was Evelyn, the evening's quiet architect, guiding the unfolding drama with a steady hand. She had set the stage, but the outcome rested in the hands of her guests. As midnight drew near, the tension in the room reached a fever pitch. Conversations grew more heated, emotions more raw. The guests were no longer performing for one another, they were baring their souls, and the experience was as exhilarating as it was unnerving. Henry stood alone near the edge of the ballroom, watching the scene unfold. Gratitude warmed his chest for the connections he'd forged, but a nagging unease lingered. Something was coming, something monumental, and the air felt charged with its approach. As if on cue, Evelyn stepped forward, her voice slicing through the din. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. She stood poised, her presence commanding yet serene. "Thank you for being here tonight. I know this evening has been unconventional, and I'm grateful for your willingness to step into the unknown." She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. "As we near the end of the night, I want to leave you with this. What you take from this experience is yours to decide. The masks are off. You've seen each other and yourselves in a new light. What you do with that truth is up to you." Her words hung heavy in the air, a challenge and an invitation. The guests exchanged glances, some nodding thoughtfully, others shifting uncomfortably. Henry felt a chill race down his spine. This was the moment, the pivot point where everything could change. But whether that change would bring clarity or chaos, he couldn't yet tell. The ballroom fell into an uneasy hush, Evelyn's words pressing down like a dense fog. For a moment, it seemed the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter the stillness. Then the grandfather clock in the corner began to toll midnight, each chime resonating with a slow, deliberate finality. Evelyn stood at the center, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the restless energy radiating from the crowd. She had given them the final push, and now their choices would shape what came next. Henry felt a knot tighten in his stomach as the last chime faded. He had spent the evening on the fringes, piecing together the night's revelations. But now he sensed something seismic was about to unfold, something that would force them all to face the truths they'd long buried. Margaret was the first to break the silence, her voice taut with suppressed emotion. "Well, Evelyn," she said, her words dripping with a sharp edge, "this has been quite the performance. But I'm left wondering, what was the point? What exactly are you trying to prove? Her question hung in the air, a thinly veiled challenge that sent a ripple of discomfort through the room. Several guests shifted, sensing the hostility beneath her words. But Evelyn remained unruffled, her voice steady and even. The point, Margaret, is that we all hide behind masks, whether we admit it or not. Tonight was about stripping those away, about seeing ourselves and each other with clarity. Margaret's lips twisted into a brittle smile. And what did you see, Evelyn? Did you find what you were looking for? For the first time, a flicker of vulnerability softened Evelyn's expression. I saw people struggling to uphold the images they've crafted. I saw fear, insecurity, the hunger for approval. But I also saw moments of truth, of real connection. That, Margaret, is what I hope for. Margaret's smile wavered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but she quickly masked it with a harsh laugh. How noble of you, Evelyn. But some of us don't have the luxury of chasing such ideals. Some of us have responsibilities, lives to protect. Her words struck a chord, and a murmur of agreement rose from several guests. The tension in the room spiked, the stakes of the evening laid bare. Jonathan, who had been watching the exchange closely, stepped forward. I think what Evelyn's getting at, Margaret, is that we've all grown too comfortable with our masks. Maybe it's time we ask ourselves what truly matters beyond the wealth, beyond the status. Margaret shot him a scathing look. Save your preaching. Jonathan, we all know what this is, Evelyn playing puppet master, testing how far she can push us. Well, congratulations. Evelyn, you've had your fun, but don't think this changes anything. When we leave here, we'll slip our masks back on, and life will go on. Her words, sharp and defiant, resonated with many, and for a moment it seemed her resolve would carry the night. But then Clara, who had been listening quietly, spoke up, her voice soft but unwavering. Maybe that's the problem, she said, drawing every eye in the room. Maybe we've worn our masks for so long that we've forgotten who we are without them. Tonight showed me how much I've been hiding and how much I've been missing. Her words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the room. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. Evelyn met Clara's gaze, a small, appreciative smile tugging at her lips. Thank you, Clara. That's exactly it. This isn't about tearing everything down, it's about seeing what's real beneath the surface. Henry, who had been absorbing the exchange, felt a surge of emotion. Clara's words echoed his own thoughts, the ones he'd been wrestling with all night. For years, he'd felt out of place in this world of wealth and privilege, blaming himself for not fitting in. But now he saw it differently. The problem wasn't him, it was the roles they all played, the masks they wore to survive. Gathering his courage, Henry stepped forward. I'm tired of pretending, he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. Tonight made me realize how much I've been hiding, not just from all of you, but from myself. I think it's time we start being honest about who we are and what we want. His words, spoken with quiet conviction, struck a chord. Nods of agreement rippled through the crowd, and the atmosphere shifted, the tension giving way to a fragile sense of possibility. Margaret, however, wasn't ready to relent. And what do you propose? Henry, she demanded, her tone biting. That we throw away everything we've built, everything we've fought for, and start over. It's not that simple. Henry met her gaze, unflinching. No, it's not. But maybe we should ask ourselves what we're holding on to and why. Are we truly happy with the lives we've built, or are we just too scared to let go? Margaret opened her mouth to retort, but Jonathan cut in before she could. He's right, Margaret. We've been so focused on protecting our image, our status, that we've forgotten what it means to live. Maybe it's time we start. In the grand ballroom, where chandeliers cast a golden glow over polished floors, Margaret stood at the center of attention, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and uncertainty. The murmurs of the other guests filled the air, their eyes fixed on her, waiting for her next move. She could feel the weight of their expectations, pressing against her like an invisible tide. Part of her wanted to brush off the words of Henry and Jonathan, idealistic notions from people she thought were too soft for the harsh realities of their world. Yet, deep inside, a quiet voice grew louder, whispering that there might be truth in what they said, a truth she had long ignored. The room fell silent, the tension so heavy it seemed to choke the very air. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Margaret exhaled a long, tired sigh. "I don't know," she admitted softly, her usual commanding tone replaced by a raw vulnerability. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we've all been so busy playing our parts that we've forgotten who we are beneath it all." Her words hung in the air, a startling confession from a woman known for her iron will and unshakable control. The guests exchanged wary glances, unsure how to react to this unexpected crack in her armor. Evelyn, ever perceptive, seized the moment to step forward. "Margaret," she said gently, her voice steady but warm, "this isn't about dismantling everything we've worked for. It's about realizing we don't have to be chained to it. We can choose to live more truthfully, to be more than the roles we've played, without losing what we've built." Margaret met her gaze, and for the first time that evening, a spark of understanding flickered in her eyes. "But what if we've worn these masks so long," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "that we don't even know who we are without them?" Evelyn's lips curved into a kind smile. "Then we start small. We take one honest step at a time, with ourselves and each other. It's not about tearing everything down overnight. It's about making choices that feel true to who we are." Margaret fell silent, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts as she weighed Evelyn's words. Slowly, she nodded. "Maybe it's time we stopped pretending," she said, her voice steadier now, as if she were testing the weight of her own conviction. The heaviness in the room began to lift, replaced by a cautious hope that spread like a soft dawn. The guests, who had spent the evening wrestling with their own tangled emotions, started to see a new possibility, a chance for something more genuine. Henry, feeling a wave of relief he hadn't expected, glanced around and noticed he wasn't alone. Clara, Jonathan, even Margaret, they were all beginning to question the facades they'd upheld for so long. For the first time in years, Henry felt a flicker of optimism, a belief that change was possible. Evelyn, sensing the shift, allowed herself a quiet smile. The night was winding down, but the real journey was just beginning. The guests had glimpsed a different way of being, and now it was up to them to decide what to do with that vision. As they began to drift away, lost in their own reflections, Evelyn caught Henry's eye and gave him a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. He returned the gesture, gratitude swelling in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he belonged. As the last guest slipped out, Evelyn stood alone in the now empty ballroom, surrounded by the echoes of the evening. The masks had been shed, the pretenses stripped away, leaving something raw and real in their place. This, she thought, was exactly what she'd hoped for, a spark of authenticity that could ignite something greater. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains of Evelyn's elegant bedroom, painting the room in hues of gold. She lay awake, her mind replaying the previous night, the heated exchanges, the unguarded moments, the revelations that had left her both exhilarated and exhausted. But there was still one task left, one final piece to set in place before she could call the evening a true success. Downstairs, Henry sat at the long dining table, now cleared of the party's remnants. He sipped his coffee, his thoughts still tangled in the intensity of the night before, the conversations, the vulnerability, the unmasking. It had been unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He wasn't sure what it all meant yet, but one thing was clear: he couldn't return to the life he'd known. As he sat lost in thought, Evelyn entered, her usual grace accompanied by a newfound lightness. "Good morning, Henry," she greeted, her smile warm and genuine. Henry looked up, startled to see her so early. "Good morning, Evelyn. I didn't expect you to be up yet." She laughed softly. "Neither did I, but last night gave me plenty to think about." Taking a seat across from him, she continued, It was quite an evening, wasn't it? Henry nodded. It was. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. I wanted to thank you. Henry, you were one of the few who truly understood what I was trying to do. Henry shrugged, a touch of modesty in his gesture. I just spoke what I felt. I think a lot of us were starting to realize we've been living a lie. Evelyn studied him for a moment, then asked, and what do you plan to do about it? The question landed heavily, carrying the weight of a future yet to be shaped. Henry hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. I've spent so long trying to fit into this world, trying to be someone I'm not. Now, I'm not sure what's next. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. It's not an easy choice, Henry, but the fact that you're even considering it tells me you're already on the right path. Curiosity sparked in his eyes. What about you, Evelyn? What's next for you? She smiled, a hint of mystery in her expression. I have my own plans, but that's a story for another day. Right now, I want to talk about you. Henry frowned, puzzled. Me? Yes, you. Evelyn confirmed. Last night, I saw something in you, a courage to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. That's rare, Henry, and it's something worth nurturing. He was taken aback. He'd always seen himself as an outsider, someone who never quite fit in. Yet here was Evelyn, one of the most influential people he knew, telling him he had something valuable. What do you suggest? He asked. His curiosity piqued. Evelyn leaned back, choosing her words carefully. Take time to think about what you truly want from life, not what you think you should want, or what others expect, but what sets your soul on fire. And when you find it, don't be afraid to chase it, even if it means leaving everything else behind. Henry fell silent, the enormity of her words settling over him. It was a daunting prospect, abandoning the life he'd worked so hard to build, but it was also freeing a chance to create something authentic. I'll think about it, he said finally, his voice tinged with both uncertainty and resolve. Evelyn's smile was encouraging. That's all I ask, Henry. And remember, you're not alone. If you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. He nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over him. Evelyn had given him something invaluable, the freedom to choose his own path. As they sat in comfortable silence, the sound of a door opening broke the moment. Clara entered, her steps hesitant as she approached. Good morning, she said softly. Evelyn gestured for her to join them. Good morning, Clara. How are you feeling? Clara's smile was strained but genuine, a bit overwhelmed. To be honest, last night was a lot. Evelyn nodded in understanding. It was, but I'm glad you're here. I was just talking to Henry about what comes next. Clara glanced at Henry, then back at Evelyn. And what does come next? Evelyn's tone was gentle but firm. That's up to you, Clara. You've seen what's possible. Now it's time to decide what you want to do with that knowledge. Clara's expression grew thoughtful. I'm not sure I'm ready for big changes yet, but I know I don't want to keep living the way I have been. Evelyn's eyes softened. That's a strong start. Take your time, figure out what matters to you, and when you're ready, make the choices that bring you closer to it. Clara nodded, a small smile breaking through. Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate that. As the three sat together, the atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to quiet determination. They were each at different points in their journeys, but they shared a common goal to live more authentically, to shed the masks they'd worn for too long. Their conversation flowed, filled with honesty and vulnerability, forging a connection that had been missing from their lives for far too long. By the time the morning sun had fully risen, the mood in the room was lighter, infused with a sense of possibility. The road ahead was long, but for the first time they felt ready to face it together. As they parted ways, each stepping into their own path, there was a sense of closure. A turning point had been reached. The party had been a catalyst, and now it was up to them to carry that change forward. Evelyn watched them go, a deep satisfaction settling over her. She had planted the seeds, and now it was time for them to grow. As she turned to leave, a thought struck her. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest steps. With that, she stepped into the bright morning light, ready to embrace the next chapter of her own journey. Weeks later, the city had returned to its usual rhythm, the buzz of the party fading into the background, replaced by new scandals and stories. But for those who had been there, the memory lingered, quietly shaping their choices in ways they hadn't anticipated. Evelyn had resumed her routines, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The party had sparked subtle changes in those around her, a new openness, a willingness to be honest that was more than she dared hope for. Today, though, was about her and a promise she meant to keep. She had arranged to meet Henry at a small downtown cafe, a cozy haven far from the glittering mansions and exclusive venues of their usual world. It was a place where she could shed the weight of her status, if only for a moment. When she arrived, Henry was already there, seated at a corner table, a cup of coffee in hand. At a cozy table nestled by the cafe's wide window, Henry looked like a man unburdened. His shoulders, once rigid with the weight of expectation, now rested easy, and his face carried a calm that hadn't been there before. As Evelyn approached, he rose smoothly, his smile warm and genuine, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Evelyn," he greeted, his voice rich with sincerity. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." "Henry," she replied, her own smile mirroring his warmth. "I was happy to hear from you." They settled into their seats, the air between them light, unhurried, no awkward small talk, no pretense, just two people who understood why they were there. The server came by, and they ordered their drinks, a latte for her, black coffee for him, a quiet ease wrapped around them, the kind that comes when words don't need to rush to fill the silence. After a moment, Evelyn broke the stillness. "So, Henry, how have you been? What's life been like for you lately?" Henry took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze drifting briefly to the window where the city hummed beyond. "It's been different," he said, his tone thoughtful. "After that night at the party, what you said, it stuck with me. You talked about being true to ourselves, and it hit me hard. I'd been living someone else's version of my life, chasing what I thought I was supposed to want. It wasn't mine, not really." Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her eyes encouraging him to go on. "So he did. I made some big changes." He continued, "I stepped away from a couple of corporate boards I was on, positions I took because they look good on paper, not because they meant anything to me. I started volunteering at a community center near my place. It's something I'd always wanted to do but kept putting off, telling myself I was too busy. And you know what? It's been like a weight lifted. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that actually matters, something that's me." Evelyn's smile widened, her eyes bright with admiration. "That's incredible. Henry, I'm so happy you found something that lights you up like that." Henry met her gaze, his expression earnest. "I owe a lot of it to you, Evelyn. That night, the way you challenged everyone to look at themselves honestly, it shook me. I don't know if I'd have found the guts to change without it." She shook her head gently, dismissing the credit. "You had that strength in you all along. Henry, I just held up a mirror. You did the hard work." They shared a quiet moment, a bond forming not from shared history, but from a deep respect for the paths they'd each chosen to walk. Henry broke the silence, curiosity in his voice. "What about you, Evelyn? What's next for you?" Her eyes sparkled, a blend of excitement and quiet confidence. "I've been pouring my heart into a few projects that mean the world to me," she said. "One of them is a foundation I'm launching. It's focused on giving resources and opportunities to communities that don't usually get a fair shot. It's something I've cared about forever, but I always pushed it aside, too caught up in other obligations. Now, I'm making it my priority." Henry nodded, clearly impressed. "That's amazing. Evelyn, you're going to change lives with that." "I hope so," she said, her voice humble but steady. "But more than that, it feels right. It's who I am, what I believe in. I spent too long trying to be what everyone else wanted. Now, I'm done with that. I'm living for me." A soft smile spread across Henry's face, a sense of peace settling over him. Sounds like we're both finding our way. Then, figuring out who we are, maybe more known, what we want our lives to mean. Exactly, Evelyn agreed, her voice warm. And I think that's the greatest adventure any of us can take. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from there, a river of shared dreams, hard-won lessons, and hopes for the future. It was raw, honest, a far cry from the polished, surface-level exchanges that used to define their world. As the afternoon stretched on, the cafe grew quieter, the city's bustle fading into a distant hum, but Evelyn and Henry were lost in their dialogue, the rest of the world slipping away. When the time came to leave, they stood, reluctant to break the moment. Henry turned to Evelyn, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you, Evelyn. You've helped me more than you'll ever know." She reached out, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "And you've helped me too, Henry. We've both come so far, and I'm proud of us. But this is just the start." He nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I know, and I'm ready for what's next." They stepped outside, parting with a shared sense of hope. The lessons of their past clung to them, not as burdens, but as guideposts for the future. For Evelyn, the journey was ongoing, but she felt grounded, certain she was on the right path. That night at the party had been a spark, a moment of clarity that set her free to chase what truly mattered. As she walked away from the cafe, she felt a quiet confidence she was exactly where she was meant to be. For Henry, the road ahead was still uncharted, but for the first time, he felt like the one steering. The masks he'd worn, the roles he'd played, they were gone, stripped away to reveal the man he was becoming. As the sun sank low, bathing the city in a golden glow, both Evelyn and Henry looked to the horizon with anticipation. The future was a blank page, brimming with possibilities they'd never dared to dream before. They carried with them a truth they'd come to understand: the most profound changes don't come from grand gestures or fleeting moments of drama. They come from the small, deliberate choices we make each day, the ones that quietly shape who we are and the lives we build.